Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we are going to discuss the Hindu newspaper dated 24th of September 2018 of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today has been presented on the screen. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let us begin our today's discussion. This particular article has been taken from the front page. The title of the article is Prime Minister launches Ayushman Bharat scheme. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS paper 2 governance under the subsection issues related to development and management of social sector or services related to health. Now this particular article has appeared in the context of the launch of Ayushman Bharat scheme by Prime Minister Modi in Ranchi. This particular scheme is going to the world's biggest health insurance scheme wherein it is going to cover almost 50 crore people in India, and the number of people which this scheme intends to cover would be approximately equal to entire population of European Union, or for that matter the entire population of North American continent, including the countries of US, Canada and Mexico. So because of its vast coverage, this particular program is considered to be the world's biggest health insurance scheme to be implemented by government of India. The significance of this particular scheme lies in the fact that this particular scheme is aimed at bringing about transformative changes in the health sector. Now, this particular aspect has been already recognized by a well-renowned medical journal known as Lancet, which has stated that the implementation of scheme would lead to paradigm shift in the healthcare implementation in India. So, it is in this particular context this article becomes extremely important from the exam perspective. Now, this particular scheme is also referred to as Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. So, as part of this video analysis, we will be comprehensively discussing all the details related to this particular scheme. So here, as part of this video analysis, firstly we'll try to understand as to what are the reasons for launching this particular scheme. Secondly, we'll understand the objectives of the scheme. Next, we will understand the components of the scheme, wherein this particular yojana has mainly two components, as you can see here. The first component is that of health and wellness centers, and the second component is that of Ayushman Bharat. Nextly, we'll understand about the various features of the scheme, and lastly we will also analyze about the various challenges which the government would probably face in the implementation of this particular scheme. Now let us start with the first part, that is as to what are the reasons for launching this particular scheme. Now, one of the main reasons for launching this particular yojana is the insurance penetration for health in India is considered to be extremely low as compared to the other countries. Now, this lack of insurance penetration in India can be understood by looking at the data which has been provided by the 71st round of National Sample Survey organization, wherein it has highlighted that almost 86% of India's population in the rural areas and 82% of the population in the urban areas do not have any health insurance. Now this becomes a problem because if people do not have access to insurance, the people would be required to spend higher amount of their income on the health related services. Now this is a snapshot of the 71st round of NSSO surveys report. Now here this particular snapshot shows the percentage of people who are covered under different types of health insurance programs. As you can see here, with respect to the rural areas, almost 86% of people are not covered under any kind of health insurance programs. When it comes to the urban areas, around 82% of people do not have access to health insurance schemes. And when it comes to the government funded health insurance scheme, even its penetration is considered to be extremely low, wherein in case of rural areas it is approximately 13, whereas in case of urban areas it is actually around 12. So one of the main reason for launching Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana is with respect to the lack of insurance penetration in India, wherein this particular yojana seeks to increase the number of people who would be covered under the insurance schemes of the government. The idea here is if government is able to provide for the health insurance, then the need for the people to spend on the health will drastically reduce. Now the second reason as to why this particular scheme has been launched is because presently the households are required to spend a huge amount of money on health related expenditure, wherein among all the expenditures related to health, the households alone account for more than 2/3 of the health related expenditure in India. Now in order to understand this particular aspect, let us now look at as to how the healthcare schemes are being financed in India. As you can see, out of the total funding on the health related expenditure, the maximum amount of money is being spent from the household, which happens to be the out of pocket expenditure, wherein it alone accounts for almost 67%. When it comes to the expenditure through the government sponsored health insurance scheme by both union as well as state government, it accounts for around 22%. This implies that more than two-thirds of the expenditure on health is out of pockets, which is incurred by the households. The second aspect here is the private health insurance accounts for less than 5% of the total healthcare financing in India. The third problem here is the health insurance covers only the inpatient treatment. Hence, it becomes extremely necessary for any universal health coverage scheme to cover OPD as well as medicines and diagnostics. So, the idea behind this particular program is to reduce the household expenditure on health and enhance the government expenditure on various health insurance schemes. And the third reason here is presently the government expenditure on health is considered to be quite lower, wherein the government presently spends hardly around 1.4% of the GDP on health. Now this is way below the targeted 2.5% of the expenditure needed on the health as mandated by National Health Policy 2017. So the main idea behind launch of this particular yojana is to enhance the insurance penetration in India, to lower the household expenditure and to enhance the government's expenditure on the health. Now coming to the objectives of this particular scheme. This particular scheme is set to become a comprehensive health benefit scheme covering all the aspects related to health. These aspects being, this scheme shall promote the well-being of the people, it shall prevent the occurrence of diseases, it shall provide for cure of various diseases. It also provides for palliative care, which means that it shall focus on specialized care such as surgeries. It also provides for a rehabilitative framework for the people who are affected by various diseases. And all these aspects related to this particular scheme is said to bring about a fundamental or a paradigm shift in the India's focus on health from illness to wellness, which means that scheme will not only help in prevention of diseases, but rather it shall promote the well-being of the people at large. Further, as discussed, this scheme also intends to increase the extent of population covered under various insurance schemes. It shall reduce the household expenditure on the health, and thirdly, it shall also include other services which are not being presently provided by the government. Thus, having understood the objectives of this particular scheme, let us now look at the components. Now coming to the first component of this yojana, that is health and wellness centers. Now these health and wellness centers are going to become the foundation of primary healthcare system in India, wherein the government intends to construct almost 1.5 lakh health and wellness centers across India in order to provide comprehensive healthcare to the people. Now here you can look at the list of services which the government intends to provide with respect to the primary healthcare in India. The services here include diagnostic services, M-Health, which stands for Electronic Database of all the patient-related data, NCD screening, which stands for screening for non-communicable diseases. It shall also include a component wherein the medicines will be distributed to the patients through the vending machines. Nextly, it seeks to provide the services 24/7, and this is possible through the adoption of telemedicine. So all of these services would be in turn provided through health and wellness centers, which would be in turn connected to the sub-centers. So here the services which will be provided by health and wellness centers will include free medicines, free diagnostic services as we have discussed for the non-communicable diseases. Further, if any of these ailments cannot be treated at these centers, then such cases shall be referred to the secondary and tertiary healthcare systems, which may either be district or specialized private sector hospitals. Now having understood about the first component of this particular yojana, now let us look at the second component of this particular yojana, which is National Health Protection Mission. Now this particular mission seeks to provide for health insurance coverage of up to rupees 5 lakh per every family. Now this insurance coverage will include both secondary as well as tertiary healthcare hospitalization, and the services which the beneficiaries can avail here would include hospitalization expenses, the expenditure related surgeries, pre and post hospitalization expenses, and newborn child or children services. With respect to the eligibility of the beneficiaries, families here would be identified as per the latest socio-economic caste census data. Further, there is no capping on the number of members in a particular family as well as the age of the members. Now, this would ensure that even the senior citizens as well as girl children are also covered under this particular mission. Now, all the beneficiaries can avail these services at all the public hospitals as well as empaneled private healthcare facilities, which means the private sector hospitals which have been selected by the government in order to provide the services. The beneficiaries are not required to pay anything for availing these services, and also services shall be cashless as well as paperless. Further, there is no need for the beneficiaries to enroll under this particular program. It provides for automatic enrollment of the beneficiaries, and hence it is called as entitlement based mission. Further, the government also intends to provide for a unique identification number for all the beneficiaries covered under this particular scheme. Further, this mission also provides for issuance of e-card to the beneficiary at the time of hospitalization. Now, this e-card will ensure for cashless as well as paperless transaction at the hospitals. Now, these are some of the components which one would be required to know with respect to National Health Protection Mission. Now, let us look at some of the challenges which the government would face with respect to implementation of this particular scheme. The first challenge here is with respect to reluctance of the private sector hospitals to cater to the patients. Now, under this scheme, as we have discussed, the government is required to fix the rate which can be charged by the private hospitals for the various services provided under the mission. However, the private sector hospitals are unhappy with the fact that the government has fixed the lower rates for some of the services which they would be providing. For example, for the surgeries related to coronary heart bypass graft, the government has fixed that the maximum limit on the surgeries should be at 90,000 rupees, which can be charged by the private sector. However, presently the private sector hospitals are charging almost around 3 lakhs. Hence, the private sector hospitals are unhappy with the lower package rate of 90,000 rupees which fixed for this surgery. The second problem is with respect to quality of care which will be provided by the private sector hospitals, wherein according to National Accreditation Board for Hospitals and Healthcare Providers, only 3% of the private sector hospitals in India have been able to provide for quality care. So this is one of the major lacunae which has to be fixed with respect to implementation of this particular scheme. The next problem is with respect to primary healthcare, wherein it has been stated that the primary healthcare in India remains one of the weakest link in the healthcare system. So unless we modernize our primary healthcare system, this particular mission would not be successful. That is why it is being said that the success of primary healthcare system in India is of paramount importance for the success of this particular mission. Now, these are the various challenges which the government would face with respect to implementation of this particular scheme. Now, a prelims question for your practice would be, consider the following statements related to Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. The first statement is, this scheme aims at providing health insurance of up to 5 lakh for all the individuals in the country. The second statement is, it seeks to provide secondary and tertiary healthcare through empaneled private sector hospitals. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? Please give your answer in the comment section given below. Now, a mains question for your practice would be, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana is considered to be a game changer and can have transformative impact on the health outcomes in India. Comment, wherein you can try writing answer to this particular question by looking at the video analysis of this particular article. Now, having analyzed all the comprehensive details related to this particular Yojana, let us now move to the next article. Now, this particular article has been taken from page number 7. The title of the article is Citizen Science Initiative Help Save Hornbills. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Environment under the subsection Conservation, Environmental Pollution and Degradation. So let us understand the context of this particular article. The hornbills are fast disappearing in both India as well as Southeast Asia. So in order to conserve and protect the hornbills, an initiative has been started, and this initiative is known as the Hornbill Watch Initiative. Now, under this initiative, the documentation of presence of hornbills in India is being undertaken in order to learn about its habitat so as to conserve and protect this particular species. So as part of this video analysis, firstly we'll try to understand about the Hornbill Watch Initiative, and in the second part of the discussion, we will understand some basic details related to the hornbill. Now, this Hornbill Watch Initiative is an interactive web interface that allows a person to report on the sightings of hornbill in India. Now, people can also record observation related to live hornbill or also note its call. Further, people can also report about a dead hunted or a captured hornbill in India. Now you can understand this by looking at the snapshot of the website of the Hornbill Watch. As you can see here, the users are required to upload details such as in which particular location they have come across the hornbills, as well as the kind of species which they have come across. Apart from that, they also have an option to upload the image of the hornbill. Now, why this documentation of the hornbill is important? Because the information which the users would share is valuable and it can help identify important sites for hornbills and the threats which they face. It will further help in initiating conservation action in some of the sites. So hence, such an initiative would help in the conservation efforts of the hornbills. Now, having discussed about the Hornbill Watch, let us now discuss certain details related to the hornbills. Now, hornbills are considered to be large and wide-ranging birds, wherein most of the species are dependent upon the tropical forest habitat that contain large and tall trees. That means that the hornbills are predominantly found in tropical forest habitats. And as these hornbills mostly eat fruits, a diversity of native forest trees are needed in order to provide their year-round requirements. When it comes to India, India has 9 hornbill species. Now you can look at the hornbill map of the Indian which shows the location of different species of hornbills in India. Let us look at some of the important hornbills. Firstly, Indian grey hornbill. This is considered to be endemic to India. Second is Malabar grey hornbill, which is endemic to Western Ghats. Third one is Malabar pied hornbill, which is endemic to both India as well as Sri Lanka. And nextly, the widely distributed great horn. And the most important fact which you need to remember about the hornbills is India has one particular species of hornbills which has got one of the smallest ranges. And this particular species happens to be Narcondam hornbill, which is found only on the island of Narcondam in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now, as you can see here, the Narcondam hornbills are confined to this particular Narcondam island of Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Further, with respect to IUCN classification, you will be required to know that the Narcondam hornbill has been categorized as endangered. However, the great hornbill has been categorized as near threatened. Now, having understood certain details related to hornbill, let us now look at one of the prelims related question asked from this particular topic. Now, this was a question asked in the prelims 2016. The question was, in which of the following regions of India are you most likely to come across the great Indian hornbill in its natural habitat? Now, this great Indian hornbill is mainly found in Western Ghats as well as northeastern part of India. So, looking at the options here, the correct answer to this particular question would be D, that is Western Ghats. Now, having understood about this particular article, let us now move to the next article. Now, this particular article has been taken from page number 9. The title of the article is Saving Cauvery's Cradle. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Environment under the subsection Conservation, Environmental Pollution and Degradation. Now, coming to the focus of this particular article. On a broader level, this particular article highlights about the ongoing debate of environment versus development. Now, taking this debate forward, it has focused at the micro level on a district known as Kodagu district, which is part of Karnataka state. Now, this particular district was in news because of the recent floods, which particularly highlights as to how unplanned development has led to environmental destruction in Kodagu district. Now, this environmental destruction caused in Kodagu district is a cause for concern because Kodagu is considered to be the origin point for river Cauvery, wherein the river Cauvery originates at a point known as Talakaveri, which is part of Kodagu district. So this particular article highlights that the continued environmental destruction can lead to water crisis in the Cauvery basin, which can in turn adversely affect the states of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu as well as Kerala, which happens to be the Cauvery basin states. Further, this particular article specifically focuses on the likely impact of the proposed railway lines to connect Kodagu. So it is in this particular aspect the author of this article has highlighted certain concerns with respect to the proposed railway lines to connect Kodagu. So let us understand about the proposed railway line project as well as the concerns raised by the author. So let us look into the background of this particular issue. The government had earlier planned to construct a railway line connecting Mysore in Karnataka to Thalassery in Kerala. Such a railway line would pass through Kodagu. Now, the importance of this particular project lies in the fact that Kodagu is the only district in Karnataka which does not have a railway line. So hence the completion of this particular project would have boosted connectivity to Kodagu, which would have in turn led to inflow of more tourists into Kodagu. However, this particular project was bitterly opposed by people of Kodagu, because of which this particular railway linkage project was finally scrapped. However, the author of this particular article cautions that such plans to boost connectivity to Kodagu will re-emerge once again, and hence it is a cause of concern. So it is in this particular aspect the author analyzes the likely impact of the project on the local ecology. Let us now look at the concerns raised by the author of this particular article. So here Kodagu has almost 45% forest cover. So the author states that the construction of railway tracks in Kodagu would lead to large-scale deforestation. Further, according to State of Forest report, Kodagu has already lost around 100 square kilometer of tree cover in the last 2 years. So the construction of the railway tracks would further accentuate this particular problem in Kodagu. The second concern raised by the author is that the construction of railway track through the protected and reserve forest in Kodagu would adversely affect the rich biodiversity of the region. The third concern which has been raised by the author is with respect to high variability of rainfall in the Cauvery Basin region, which he says would adversely affect the water availability in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu as well as Kerala. Now, in order to substantiate his point related to variability of rainfall, the author has highlighted that in the month of March, Kodagu faced a shortage of drinking water, and this shortage was in turn followed by the recent floods. So you can see here the water availability in Kodagu district has drastically changed within a span of 1 year. For this, the author says that this variability of rainfall can be attributed to uncontrolled development activities which are taking place in this particular region. Finally, the author states that protecting Cauvery Basin is extremely important for all the three Cauvery Basin states. For this, all the three states have to give higher priority to the environment and give up unplanned development activities in the basin. So these are the various aspects which the author has covered in this particular article. Now, having understood about the debate between environment versus development, specifically with respect to Kodagu district of Karnataka, let us now move to the next article. This particular article has been taken from the business section of page number 14. The title of the article is Decoding Total Expense Ratio. This particular article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3, Economy, under the subsection Indian Economy and Various Issues. Now, this particular article has appeared in the context of recent changes announced by the SEBI with respect to the total expense ratio for the mutual fund companies in India. So, it is in this particular context, this particular article mainly focuses on two aspects. Firstly, it tries to explain the concept of total expense ratio. Secondly, it analyzes the impact of the changes on the investors. To understand the concept of total expense ratio, let us first try to understand as to how a mutual fund company works. As you can see in the diagram here, the mutual fund company takes money from the various investors, and this money the mutual fund company would in turn invest in different financial instruments such as equities, that is shares, bonds, and other financial instruments. Now, whatever profits the mutual fund company makes on these financial instruments are in turn paid back to the investors from whom the mutual fund company has taken the money. Now, in carrying out this particular function, the mutual fund companies charge a commission. This commission is presently levied on percentage of investment which is done by the investors. Now, this particular commission which is charged by the mutual fund company on the percentage of investment is referred to as TER, that is total expense ratio. Let us understand this by an example. Let's say here the investor C has invested 1000 rupees in a mutual fund company, for which the total expense ratio is 2.75%. So in this case, the mutual fund company would be deducting 27.5 rupees as a commission before paying back the profits earned on the investment to the investor C. Now SEBI has reduced the total expense ratio, which means that the investors would now be required to pay lesser commission. Hence, the reduction in total expense ratio would attract more number of investors towards the mutual funds, and this would lead to greater financial inclusion. Now, having understood about total expense ratio and as to how it affects the investors, let us now move to the next article. Now, this particular article has been taken from the editorial page number 8. The title of the article is The Primary Anchor of Healthcare Roadmap. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 2, Governance, under the subsection issues related to development and management of social sector or services relating to health. Now, this particular article has appeared in the newspaper in the context of the launch of Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana by Prime Minister Modi. However, this particular article is different in terms of its focus as compared to the first article which we have covered in today's DNS, wherein this article states that the success of this particular program would depend upon the nuts and bolts of good governance. That is, the success of this particular program would depend upon how effectively we would be able to implement the scheme. So it is in this particular aspect the article has given certain suggestions in order to improve the governance, which would lead to strengthening the implementation mechanism of this particular yojana. So as part of this video analysis, we shall basically discuss as to what suggestions have been given in this particular article. The first suggestion in this article is with respect to identification of beneficiaries. Now, as we have discussed in the first video, the government intends to identify the beneficiaries under this particular scheme under the latest socio-economic caste census. However, the author of this particular article states that the beneficiaries should not be identified as per the socio-economic caste census. That is, the identification of beneficiaries should be de-linked from the poverty line. And the main reason here could be because the poverty line has lot of errors and omissions, because of which some of the genuine beneficiaries may not get the benefits of this particular program. So this article highlights that instead the beneficiaries should be identified based on income, because the income of the families is intrinsically linked to the access to health, for which the author of this particular article highlights that we need to use the income lines prepared for housing by a public sector undertaking known as HUDCO. Now, this particular HUDCO categorizes all the families in India in 4 different categories. As you can see here, these families are economically weaker section, lower income group, middle income group and higher income group. So here the article highlights that the same income lines should be also used for identification of beneficiaries under the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. The second suggestion given in this article is with respect to accountability of the private sector. Now, as we have discussed earlier, under this Yojana, private sector would be required to provide for secondary and tertiary care. So it is in this particular aspect there is a need to enforce accountability of the private sector. So this accountability can be enforced to multiple ways. Firstly, the government would be required to lay down standard treatment protocols. Secondly, the government should lay down guidelines in order to rule out unnecessary treatment which may be done by the private sector in order to earn profits under this yojana. And thirdly, here the article suggests that there should be no limit on the number of private healthcare providers. This is because when more number of healthcare providers are given the opportunity, this would lead to increase in competition. This would further lead to increase in the quality of healthcare services as well as reduction in the healthcare costs provided by the private sector hospitals. Third suggestion given in this article is with respect to government's focus on the primary healthcare. So the article suggests that the government should predominantly focus on the primary healthcare because this acts as a first line of treatment for the patients. In order to further substantiate this particular point, the article has given the example of 2 states in India, that is Kerala and Tamil Nadu, wherein these 2 states have majorly focused on primary healthcare centers, because of which these states have better health outcomes as compared to the other states such as lower IMR and MMR of both Kerala and Tamil Nadu. So these are certain suggestions given in this article with respect to how to improve the implementation mechanism of Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. Now, having understood about this particular article, let us now move to the next article. Now, this is a data point which appears on page number 9. This particular data point talks about a particular index known as multidimensional poverty index. Now, this particular index becomes important because normally questions have been asked in the UPSC prelims with respect to different indices. So it is in this aspect, let us understand some details related to multidimensional poverty index. Let us first understand the philosophy behind multidimensional poverty index. The main philosophy here is that this particular index recognizes that poverty is not a unidimensional concept. That means that poverty is not dependent on the income alone, wherein poverty may also arise due to lack of access to basic services such as education as well as health. So it recognizes the fact that the poverty is a cause of multiple deprivations. So let us now understand as to how the MPI is measured. The multidimensional poverty index is measured with respect to 3 dimensions and 10 indicators. The 3 dimensions of poverty which the MPI measures include health, education, and living standard. Now, the 3 dimensions which the MPI uses are similar to the ones which are used by Human Development Index, since even the Human Development Index, that is HDI, takes into account health, education, as well as standard of living. However, the MPI uses 10 different indicators in order to analyze the deprivations in terms of these 3 dimensions. Now, these 10 indicators are nutrition, child mortality, years of schooling, school attendance, cooking fuel, sanitation, water, electricity, floor, and assets. Further, if any household has a deprivation of minimum 33% of the weighted indicators here, then such an household is declared as multidimensionally poor household. Further, you need to know that this particular index is measured by United Nations Development Program and Oxford Poverty and Development Initiative. Further, coming to the highlight of MPI 2018, this particular report highlights that India has been able to reduce by half the multidimensional poverty index from 54% in the year 2005-6 to 27% in 2015-16. Now, this particular reduction in the poverty in India is considered to be quite remarkable by the United Nations Development Program. Further, about 196 million poor people as identified by multidimensional poverty index, which accounts for more than half of all the multidimensionally poor people in India. They predominantly are living in the 4 states of India, these being Bihar, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh. Now, these are some of the aspects which you would be required to know with respect to multidimensional poverty index. With this, we have come to end of today's discussion. Now let us look at the question of the day.